So we are now live officially with Dr. Jancy McPhee, and you are by profession what? I mean, you've studied so many things. What is the actual profession that you go by?
So I have a PhD in neuroscience. So my story is that I was always interested in science and always good at it, but all of my hobbies were music and theater.
Mm-hmm.
So when I went to college and had to decide what I wanted to study, I tried to find something that would blend all of my interests together. So I chose neuroscience, which is the biology of thoughts and emotions and creativity and movement. So it allowed me to kind of put all my interests together. And then I became a laboratory research scientist. And I studied the cells and molecules that make your nervous system work.
Mm-hmm.
And parts of cells and molecules, very, very small pieces. And then I missed the big picture a little bit. So I went to NASA Johnson Space Center and I used all that scientific training, but in a slightly different way. I used it to help coordinate international space life sciences research programs.
So what does that mean? International space science research programs.
Right. So it meant a couple of things. So the thing that I did the most was I tried to coordinate multiple sites around the world who wanted to do research together that was performed in a way that was standardized so that we could actually pool our data. So each site would be able to do in science we have to have things to compare our data to, and the data you get is more meaningful if you have larger numbers of samples that you have collected. So, but the research we were doing was very expensive and complicated, and so the idea was if each of the three different sites could do a third of the data collection, it would save each of the sites money. But in order to do that, we had to design our equipment and how we do our experiments in a similar enough way that we could actually compare and pool our data. So it was a lot of work, but I wasn't just interested in standardizing research. I was also interested in fostering collaborations so that we could, we're talking about space exploration is off the planet. But a lot of the groundwork testing is done here on the planet, and I think it's beneficial to get a diverse viewpoint about what is the best science, what needs to happen, what are we going to do while we're in space. So the work was largely about in-person human exploration, my work with NASA, and less about robotic exploration. So those were the kinds of things I was doing.
Interesting. And I mean, you were doing that how many years ago?
So I actually am still doing not exactly that work, but I do some work where I'm interested in thinking about kind of the next steps of space exploration. So I think that word is filtering out that many countries around the world are interested in going back to the moon. And we are going to go to the surface of the moon. We're going to go with robotic instruments and landers. And we're also going to try to go back in person. So the world is preparing to return to the moon and stay a longer time and live and work and build habitats and have an entire commercial economy and do a lot of science. There's a lot that we can learn, not just about the moon, but about our own planet and about the universe and our solar system by studying things from the moon.
Aha. There's obviously a commercial value to that information. So what happens to that research once you find it?
So A number of things. Yes, there is an important commercial aspect to that. And actually, more and more of the government-led agencies are actually trying to figure out how to work more collaboratively, not just with other countries and agencies, but also with commercial entities who are interested in space exploration. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a new model, and everyone is trying to figure out how to do that, because historically it used to be that there were just a couple of very large space agencies and they pretty much ran everything. But it's very clear that more and more countries are interested in space exploration, and more companies are interested in, is there an ecosystem? Are there things that we can mine? Is there actually an economic structure, even just in the supporting of space science and engineering as we move further away off the planet? Now, obviously, there is already a space economy. We have satellites, and they communicate and take data, and there are commercial entities that have worked with the International Space Station as it's been orbiting for more than a decade. And so there's quite a bit of economy already, but now we're entering the next level. And one of the things that we're interested in knowing is, can we live and work on the moon? Can we live and work on the moon and use it as a test bed to figure out how we will live and work and do science on Mars? And one of the big questions, for example, is how will we use resources that are on the surface of either the moon or Mars or another location? How will we use that to build the things that we need to get some of the things that we need to keep the human alive? And all of those different things are very interesting, and potentially there will be an economy associated with identifying those resources and mining them and then turning them into useful products. But first, we need to do some more science to understand exactly where they're located, mm-hmm. and how we will actually test the technology to turn those raw materials into useful things. And it's really a wonderful partnership when agencies and commercial entities work together, because the more research we do, the more we know about the commercial possibilities, and the less risk it is for commercial entities to get involved. So it's a real partnership here that the world is trying to develop. Mm-hmm. And it's a very interesting new era of space exploration, and it's happening soon.
Probably sooner than most people think. I mean, within the next few years, we've been to the moon before. So as difficult as that task was back then, we are way more prepared. The equipment is better. The people are far more organized. Now we've got cheaper modes of transport that will get there quicker, and probably a little bit more safer. So I do think that from a potential, a growth point of view, we're going to be able to obviously do a lot more. But so my question is, when we get to the moon, there's obviously a human aspect. It's not just the case of, can we find water, can we find rocks, and can we find certain things we can turn into resources that can be used? Do we take our own stuff with us? Do we become self-sustainable? I mean, are we taking a little module with us that we're going to live inside so that we don't have any issues, but we don't rely on the moon? But then what's the point? Why go to the moon if we're going to take a self-sustaining environment with us?
So you broke up a little bit there, but I think you're asking about the human aspect, mm-hmm. of basically space development and exploration. And it's a very interesting topic. There's a lot of discussion over what can be done robotically and what can be done in person. And actually, they're mowing the lawn. So if you hear a new buzz outside, there's a little extra noise, but it hopefully won't last very long. Mm-hmm. So I am very interested in the human aspect from a lot of different perspectives. So to start closer to the question you were asking, so there are still a lot of things that the human being is better at than the robots.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's an important aspect. There are a lot of discussions with my colleagues about, for instance, if you just think about lunar or Martian geology, how much can we do with robots remotely and autonomously? How many decisions need to be made in person by a trained human being? So there are a lot of advantages. And in order to support longer missions, we are going to need to develop the tools we need to live and work on the surface. And so we're going to need some sort of habitat structure.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we've been living in space for a long time on the International Space Station, and there's been a lot of research about what is needed to keep the human healthy physically and emotionally and mentally as well. And we've made great strides there, but there will be more research required with each new environment that we go to, because each one brings a new set of challenges. Some of them are physical, some of them are emotional. So there's a lot of interesting research into taking care not just of the human body, but also the human behavior and welfare. And there are a lot of people who are asking questions. If we're really out in space for a long time, what are we going to do for entertainment? And what are we going to do to keep all the other parts of being human alive, like, you know, the role of art on the interior of a habitat, the ability to make things creatively, the recreation that will be available. So we've had a lot of focus on being safe and healthy, and some on recreation, but there's even more research that needs to be done. Now, to move a little further away from your question,
Mm-hmm.
when I gave the introduction about sort of my formal credentials, I didn't tell you that during my process of working with NASA, I realized how important there were a couple of aspects that I'm very interested in. And you could tell that when I was a neuroscientist, when I chose to become a neuroscientist. But sometimes you don't understand your path and your journey until you're looking back at
Mm-hmm.
it. You don't always know what is influencing you along the way. You don't know what experiences are going to turn out to really affect you and be important. And therefore, when I talk to people, I always say, keep yourself open to broad experiences as much as possible. So the three things that I realized I was very interested in were, how do we communicate about space and all the underlying science and technology? It seemed to me, and I started thinking about these things about 10 years ago, it seemed to me that we could be doing a better job. So that was the first thing. So it's communication and education. The other thing that I was very interested in is, what is the process of being creative? We have so many future challenges in moving to the next steps in space exploration, but also we have future challenges in other science and technology fields as well. How can we address those challenges? How can we best prepare ourselves and our teams to work collaboratively to come up with those solutions? And then the third thing is, just because I think this is more based on my personality than anything, but I am very much the teaming queen.
Mm-hmm.
I am very interested in how we get different kinds of people to work together in an effective way to solve these challenges. So all of these things come back to our challenges, but I think those three different things, the communication, the creativity, and the teamwork, are three important elements that we could know more about and work on to prepare ourselves to solve some of our challenges. So I did start a nonprofit, but the work that preceded that nonprofit began while I was a scientist, and it basically was called the Humans in Space Art Program, and it involved using art integration techniques to help foster some of these things that I think are important. So the basic idea is, we hold international multimedia contests about an important or interesting question about space exploration. And sometimes we're asking children to provide musical, literary, visual, or film artwork. Sometimes we're inviting young adults and early career professionals. Other times we're actually inviting professional artists or even professional scientists to create artwork about their work so that we can weave this artwork into multimedia displays that then engage and inspire everyone who sees the artwork about the future of space exploration. So we touch the lives of the participant. We encourage them to learn the topic. So if they're a scientist or engineer, they learn to create something different and to look at their science and engineering differently and to become a better communicator. If they are an artist, we invite them to learn about space and contribute to the future and become invested in it. So it's a very broad effort to invite basically everyone to get more engaged in the future of space exploration, but also to prepare and train themselves to be better equipped to help us solve the grand challenges. So, okay. Sorry, that was a long...
No. That hit the nail on the head. So the real issue at the moment is that we are planning to go to Mars, but obviously it makes sense to first go to the moon and test out, the living environment on the moon before we go venture a little bit further down the line to Mars. But of course, it makes more sense to first try some things on Earth too. I mean, I know of a few what they call analog projects where people are putting themselves in extreme environments to see if they can survive under very difficult circumstances. And then obviously the moon would be a breeze without the breeze, of course, because there's no atmosphere. So, I mean, it would be so much easier to go to the moon if we've tested many of the different living environments on Earth.
Absolutely, and that is exactly what we're doing. So we have a lot of work that we do in the desert. We have work we do in caves. We have work in the Arctic and the Antarctic. We also have special facilities that are built to mimic being isolated from the outside world for long periods of time. We also have research that mimics the long-term effects of being in a reduced gravity environment. Interestingly, most of our scientific data, though, both on the Earth and in space, is the simulations mostly look at the effect of essentially no gravity on the human body. And we know what it's like to live on Earth, which is, a one gravity unit. Mm-hmm. But what we don't know is what it's going to be like to live on the moon and Mars.
And sixth of the gravity.
Right. Or 3/8, because we have no data between 0 and 1, except for some simulations that we have tried to do. And more people are proposing work to try to understand what would be the effects on the human body to be in an environment that's between 0 and 1, especially for a long period of time. And the moon will allow us to get a little bit of data, at least at 1/6 G. Will it be very much like living with no gravity? Or will it be very much like living on Earth with the gravity that we're accustomed to? Mm-hmm. We just don't know, because we don't know whether it's a straight line between 0 and 1, or a curve like that, or a curve like that. We just don't know how the plot will look between those 2 points.
Okay,
so it's very interesting.
You're going to be involved in the Humans to Mars Summit. And obviously at this particular event, there's a lot of discussion surrounding the trip to Mars, how we're going to live there. So you've obviously put a lot of thought into landing on the moon and doing the stuff on the moon. Do you also put a lot of thought into going to Mars?
Yes. So that is one of the important things that drives the quests for science and research, both for the humans and robotic and equipment. So it's a very important set of questions. But our most recently completed contest artwork is actually a suite of films and posters asking college and early career professionals to create the films and posters about what will it be like to go to Mars as the first humans. So all of those are online and available for display. So we actually have a huge suite of artwork just about Mars. So I am very equal opportunity in my interest in the questions that need to be explored. And I am also very interested in, as I mentioned, giving as many different kinds of people an opportunity to get engaged. And so by asking the public to create artwork, we are giving them an opportunity to really feel, to share their views of what this future should be like, and to also feel a part of it, but they're also telling their story. And the topic of my lecture at Humans to Mars is actually going to be, why do we need to tell the story of the future of humans on Mars, and who is responsible to do that? And I will, not to, make it so that nobody needs to go, but basically I'm going to say that we all need to tell that story, because we all have something to share about that story. Everyone has a different human experience base. And I think it's an important thing. Everyone needs to get engaged. This is a next step for humans. And we are inherently curious, and we like to experiment. And it's very natural for this to become one of the most important things that we do next. It's just, how are we going to handle it? And for instance, you haven't asked this, but a lot of the artwork that we get basically asks the question, why are we going further into space when we have so many issues here on Earth?
And that's a very topical issue.
It is. It's very topical, and it's very important. There are a lot of questions like that that need to be addressed. And the art form allows the why of space exploration better than our white papers and technical reports. And why is important. If we want to have support, if we want people to want to learn the skills to participate in this future, if we want them to vote for this future, if we want them to help us develop the technology and do the research, if we want them to tell our story in the newspapers and social media, we want them to paint the insides of our habitats or help us to live a full life there. The why is very important. And so it's a good question to be asking, and we have some answers, but it's important even just the act of asking the question.
Of course, I think once you build a natural curiosity and you start asking why, people then start finding innovative ways to answer that question. And sometimes that results in certain discoveries because the question challenged people on something that they took for granted. So that makes sense. Let's go back to 1969. A couple of guys landed on a big rock floating in space. If social media was around then, and your arts initiative was around then, how do you think the story would have played out from a storytelling point of view? Because you're telling me it's so important to talk about the story of going to the moon and going to Mars and who's going to report it. We know about a situation where we went to the moon in 1969. If you'd go back then, how would you have reported it?
So I was alive in 1969.
No, I know that, but I'm just saying the project was running at that particular time.
No, it wasn't. I think that it would have been fascinating to have invited people to contribute their feelings and impressions of that time. A good example is there have been great efforts at many of our future space missions who have invited the public to get engaged in their missions. Curiosity, most recently New Horizons. There's a huge long list, and I'm not doing justice by giving you a broader perspective. But I think it's a wonderful opportunity. If someone wants to write a song about our return to the moon, or if someone wanted to write a song, landing on the moon made it into music. It was all over television. It
Uh-huh.
was in eloquent speeches going forward. It was heard in the voices of the astronauts from the surface of the planet. So all we had that 50 years ago, but now we have a chance for even more people to talk about the awe and the impact and how it makes them feel and why it's important and all of those different things. And we are trying to do a small part in that by actually we have an open contest right now that is for anyone from around the world,
Mm-hmm.
ages 10 to 18, and it's called the moon. It's about what will we do on the moon, and it's part of our Humans in Space youth art competition, and it's asking young people between ages 10 and 18 to create music and literature and film and visual art about what will we do on the moon. And it's open until the middle of May. So there's still lots of time for young people to work together, to learn a little bit about why we're going back to the moon, and think about their visions and their views and what impressions they would like to share through these creative formats.
Well, I mean,
So
I will say this,
super
that
smart.
if one is being creative, um, then one has to obviously explore certain scientific facts. If you're going to portray the moon or life on the moon, you can't just say, oh well, then we'll be pouring tea from a jug, because there's a certain science that says that's not going to happen. So what I do think is that sometimes the art can be inspired by the science behind it. So that's, I mean, it's a bit of a no-brainer. That's pretty much why I want to lead into the next topic, and that is, right now it's very popular to have STEM education, the science, technology, engineering, and maths. And in the last, I don't know, I'd say about the decade, people were talking about STEAM. And then afterwards, they went from STEAM, they switched into STEAMY or eSTEM, or they've given it all different names, but effectively they are talking about using the art within the science. And I'm very curious to hear from you, your opinion on, putting art into the science, and why schools are missing out if they don't include the art.
So I will start with a little bit of perspective as having been trained as a scientist, and I will also provide a little bit of data. So first of all, I think that the STEAM movement is fabulous, but I also think that it's a little bit of going back to the Renaissance.
Uh-huh.
And I do think that's important because the neuroscientist in me, there's this very oversimplified idea that you're either left brained or right brained, and that's just kind of the way you are. And that is, there are definitely parts of the brain that are specialized for particular activities, but why would anybody ever want to only use half their brain? That just doesn't make sense to me. Plus, it's not really the way it works. In order to be creative, whether you're a scientist or an engineer or an artist, what you do is you pull on all the different kinds of experience that you have, your detailed knowledge and your broad knowledge, and you make new connections between that information. So everybody needs to be using their full capacity as much as possible. So by teaching young people to be good at only one or the other, some of it is by necessity, because you do have to specialize in order to contribute to the workforce in many cases. But my plea is to allow the broadness as much as possible. So by encouraging, for instance, if you look at our scientists and engineers, there's a big difference between a good scientist and a great one. And I believe that some of those differences are the other skills that we don't tend to teach in our science and engineering classes, like the ability to communicate, the ability to work well with other people, the ability to approach a problem in multiple different ways using different mental devices and mental approaches. And I think those are very important skills to be really an excellent scientist and an engineer. Plus, I think that we tend to be a little exclusive and we don't invite people who have different kinds of training into our science and engineering problem solving. So we need to develop sensitivities between people to make them better team players. Oh yes, I'm going to work with that person. That person's an artist. I believe that they have something to contribute. I know that they use different words than I do. I know that they may approach the problem solving differently. But I have had some training and I understand and value that, and we're going to figure out how to work together. Similarly, the artist is saying, well, you know, I don't think exactly the way the scientist does, but I respect and value that, and we're going to work together. I think there's a lot that we can do to allow a more collaborative problem solving. So I think inserting the A or the M or the Y or all the other letters into our education system is really just a general plea for don't be so narrow in what a student is taught. And within an art class, you can take on a science or technology topic.
Okay, sorry, I just had to mute there. All right. I know we've got some people who are watching it live, and we also have people who are joining us in the room over here as well. So we'll start with Mr. McNulty. Are you guys joining us for the rest of the session? If you are, do you have any questions? And any of the panel over here, Katrine and is it Rihanna? I'm not sure who else is there with us. You can just type in your names and then where you're from, so we can let everyone know who you are. I know we had Kiki from Greece, but she has left with her group. So, Mr. McNulty, any questions from your side? You guys, are you a stream? Are you a STEAM? Are you a STEM middle school? What are you?
Well, you can hear us right now, right?
We can.
Excellent, good sound. I have a question right off the bat. I heard you talking about collaborative work, working together, the basic human skills that we don't always talk about. But this is a middle school. That's what we're all about. Can you give us an example of a project that your organization does that brings together that kind of teamwork, maybe a collaborative project of some sort?
So we are still fairly a relatively young nonprofit. So we are still working on that. But I do a lot of lecturing and workshops and training to try to develop some of those team skills. That's a much more in-person activity. And I also have a lot of colleagues that I work with as we try to develop what does it take to be a good team player. A lot of the international online contests have people who enter as teams. And so I know that a lot of teachers use our online contest as a model to actually practice team skills right there in their environment. So they will put together a team or have young people assemble their own team to take on one of these prompts for the international contests. And that allows them to really try to take on something that has a lot of different diverse aspects to it, and that brings to the forefront a lot of the training that's required. You know, in order to be a strong team, you need to have empathy for where other people are coming from, where their ideas are coming from. You have to communicate in a language that takes into account the priorities and the way other people are talking. You need to be resilient when your idea is not always the one that's selected by the majority of the team. There's a lot of things that get practiced by doing those team activities.
I mean, that's an incredibly valid point. I see it. You do have another question. We'll come back to you, Mr. McNulty. Katrine, do you guys have a question there in Germany? You can just unmute yourself.
Yes, not at the moment. We are just listen to the interview. Maybe later.
Okay, that's no problem. No problem.
Okay.
And I think we have a guest from Russia. Do you have a question that you want to ask? We have no response yet. Okay. We'll come back to Mr. McNulty. You want to ask another question?
By the way, I didn't introduce, but this is Holland Middle School. We're in Pennsylvania near Philadelphia. And our questioner's coming up. He's going to introduce himself in a minute.
So I grew up in Pennsylvania.
Oh, really? Where at?
Just north of Philadelphia.
That's us. Yeah, we're in Bucks County near Newtown, Doylestown, that whole area. All right, now go ahead.
I grew up in Tottenham.
And I have a question. Do you think Elon Musk will use this art research to find a way to Mars?
Can you ask the question? You broke up.
Oh, do you think Elon Musk will use this art research to find a way to Mars?
Will Elon Musk use art research to find a way to Mars?
Could he be inspired by maybe, you know, students who develop a way to get to Mars, and then they create rocket ships in their imagination, and that inspires him to create something that most people would say it can't be done?
So the question you're asking is, how does so Steve already mentioned how science and technology inspires art, but the larger question of what you're asking is, how does art inspire science and technology? And so we didn't talk about that flip side. And so you're right on target. You're being very specific in your question, because Elon Musk is definitely a personality that everybody knows. Mm-hmm. He's also extremely engaging in many ways, and I would argue he's already using art. You know, when he sent that car, mm-hmm. Spaceman, Rocket Man, whatever he was named, into space. So he's already engaging in art and allowing this to inspire what he wants to do, and to use it as a tool to inspire others. But the larger issue is just, how does art impact science? And I am really fascinated in that topic, because I'd like to see it happen in a more concrete way. But we definitely have obvious examples where, first of all, art is a fabulous communicator. And, you know, policies, public opinions, voting, all of that can be well communicated through art. And that includes advertising, whether it's music or film or posters or things that you see. But I think that Steve was already mentioning that a lot of times what happens is there are ideas out there that are not reality. And so you can't just go out and take a picture and say, okay, this is what we're going to do. You have to turn these nebulous ideas from the brains of the one person or the team and turn them into something that everybody can relate to. So a lot of times that will be, for instance, a visual concept. And one of the people who has really helped us along the way was a fairly well-known space artist who actually worked in an engineering company. And he would sit in on all of the technical discussions, and he would actually capture through visual art a lot of what was being proposed around the table. And it was fabulous, because a lot of times it wasn't exactly what they were thinking, but by seeing it conceived, it kept the dialogue going. And sometimes something is visualized in art that then strikes an idea in a scientist or an engineer. And just going back to the work that I started to talk about that I used to do internationally, the topic that we used to look at was whether or not we should have artificial gravity on long duration space missions, because we don't know what will happen for really long periods of time without gravity, years and years and years. So there are a lot of different ways to generate gravity. You can spin someone in a small centrifuge for a couple of hours a day, or you can spin the entire spacecraft. And we have never had an entire spacecraft like that spinning. And so whenever somebody wanted to talk about it in these scientific meetings, they would clip out an image from the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, which had been made decades before, because the best portrayal of that was actually from a movie. So these are interesting things. It's an excellent question. Thank you for asking that.
Yeah, I mean, if I can say, I mean, not only is it a great question, but the reality is, if you guys go back to your Netflix and you pull a series, you probably never heard of it. It's called Star Trek, and Star Trek is a series that people that my age might be able to relate to, where they had these things called aliens and rockets, and they even were able to move people from one place to another using wizardry in science. But what has happened is that, when you look at the way they communicated with their little flip, what they call the flip communicators, I mean, those are replicas of the old Motorola cell phones that are now so old we don't even consider that as technology anymore. And what we have noticed is that science fiction has become science fact. And that's because of the creative minds of the people who put together the Star Trek series. So now what I've noticed is that in the old days, people used their creativity and they put programs on. Nowadays, they are so focused on accuracy that they don't take creative license enough. And that means that, yes, if they are going to portray a ship, they are going to try and portray a realistic one. And they're not going to think too much outside of the box, because people are going to go, oh, that's so unrealistic. And already when I interview astronauts and I interview people from NASA and from ESA, they will always tell me which aspects of the movies were unrealistic. But the reality is that sometimes we need that whimsical, outside of the box thinking to inspire people to say, that's not possible, but something that is similar is. And let's maybe look at that. I mean, when people watch rockets flying off and then they would come and land in the ocean, along comes Elon Musk and says, why don't we get a vertical rocket to land back on the launch pad? I mean, that was just the most insane thing. And if you actually picture a vertical rocket and you're thinking, how do you control this thing to actually land vertically? It's mind-blowing. But yet he managed to do it. And I think it was based on some of the creative things he might have seen. So it would be very sad if we only had accurate portrayals of where we are going. And of course, we haven't been to space, to Mars yet from a human point of view. So yes, there will be some creative license. And already we've had a couple of movies that are a little interpretive of, the storms, the dust storms that we have. We've had Jim Green, the chief NASA scientist, tell us that no, the dust is so fine that you wouldn't even know the dust was going over you if there was a dust storm, and it wouldn't be like in the movie with what was it called? It was called
The Martian.
The Martian. There we go. With it'll come to me. I can picture his face. You know who I'm talking about? Yes,
I do. I can't remember his name right this minute either.
it's that time of day. But what is fascinating is that, we do need that kind of creativity to spark ideas. And the group wasn't here, Ms. McNulty's group was not here earlier. But can you just tell us a little bit more about this organization that you run? Maybe give us a little bit of context in terms of the history, and then tell us about some of these art competitions that these students can take part in.
Okay, so as I was explaining earlier, I was a scientist at NASA, and while I was there, I really felt that we needed to do a better job communicating about the future of space exploration and getting everyone engaged in that future. So I was actually on the scientific planning committee for an international space research meeting, and it was a difficult time. It was very much a transition time for space exploration. The shuttle was going away, and everyone was thinking about the next thing. And so the science planner said, let's make it the next golden age of human spaceflight. And somehow this was a light bulb moment for me, just like out of the movies, when I felt like we really needed to engage those who were going to carry out that golden age. So it's those of you in Holland Middle School right now are the ones who are actually going to carry out that future. And if we don't engage you in some way in that future, you're not going to prepare yourself and you're not going to be interested in contributing. And so I needed a common language that could create a dialogue across the generations and across the national borders. And so I selected art. And when I say art, I mean multimedia. So it's music, it's films, it's literature, it's visual art. And that was the first Humans in Space Youth Art Competition. It was held in Houston. Then a couple of years later, we did something similar, and it wasn't held in Houston. It had a live performance event when the contest was over in Houston. Then we did it again when the German Space Agency was running this international meeting, and they also wanted to reach out worldwide and engage young people in the future of space exploration. So it was clear that it was a decent model. It was at the appropriate time. It was timely in this interest in developing more than just facts and analytical skills, but also the abilities of people to be better communicators and more creative. And it was also the right time in space exploration. So that was the Humans in Space Art program. And about 7 years later, I spun that work off to be managed under our nonprofit, SciArt Exchange. So that's at sciartexchange.org. And we are now continuing to hold international contests about the future of space exploration and to weave all of that artwork into as many displays and performances as we can. We've been fortunate to have more than 8,000 participants and more than 1 million in-person eyeballs now looking at the artwork. So, and that doesn't count social media and online, that's just in person. So I think that there's a desire. People want to be engaged in the future, no matter what their background is. And we live for that moment when someone says, "Thank you for this opportunity. I've been waiting 20 years for it." Or, "Thank you, Miss Jancy. You've changed my life, and now I'm going to be something else, or I'm going to be better at what I do." So I would love to invite those of you at Holland and anyone else listening to this call to please go to humansinspaceart.org and create something about what will we do on the moon. And please submit that. Everything's submitted electronically. And please submit that because we really do care about what you think. And we do also want you to be a part of this future and to also prepare and train yourselves, no matter whether you self-identify as a scientist or an artist or another kind of person. We need everybody. So please get engaged and share with your friends. And we look forward to hearing what you think about the future.
Well, now I'm going to challenge you. First of all, you have an age limit. What about us artists who are a little bit over the age limit? Do you have anything for us? I mean, the sum total of my artistic ability is finger painting, but I still have potential. I mean, I could do a planet, you never know. So what happens to people like me?
So sign up on the mailing list at sciartexchange.org because we have lots of different kinds of contests. We also have contests that cater to very young children. We have contests for young adults. We have contests for professionals. There really is an opportunity for everyone. But if you're really dying to do something, right now you can sign up to be a judge for the Moon Youth Art Contest. And there's a call for judges right now, and there's a link on the Humans in Space Art website. And it is another way that we engage people in the future of exploration, because they are looking at all of this artwork. They're critiquing it, yes, on its aesthetic, its artistic capabilities, but they're also critiquing the message, its relevance to the theme, and the value that it will bring to the listeners and viewers. Because remember, the activities we do are not just holding the contests. We use that multimedia artwork to influence others, to get them excited in the future. So the artwork that we get through the contest has to be effective at communicating. It's a kind of a serious art contest. This is not just, some little thing that you put on the refrigerator.
Do you
Those
have
are
any
valuable
prizes
too.
that go
What's
with
that?
this? Are there any prizes that go with it?
Yes. So for the children's contest this year, there are some small monetary prizes, and we've figured out how to award across all the different national boundaries. So we're getting better at distributing those. It's actually not trivial to send money around the world. Sort of depends on where you are and what resources you have. But one of the most important things that we find that young people in this age group really value is that they want people to respect their ideas. And they want people to see their ideas, and they want to be contributing. So what I've heard from past students, many of whom are graduating from college and going to graduate school and contributing to the future already, is that the most important thing is that they take the time to be inspired. They take the time to be creative. Now they want to be heard. And that is one of the most important things that we offer, because what we do with the artwork is as important as the contest phase. It's part of our philosophy.
You've seen a lot of artwork. You've seen a lot of the multimedia. Maybe talk us through one or two of the things that have jumped out and said to you, hello world, this is what you should be looking at. I mean, are there any things that have literally just blown you away and you thought to yourself, I mean, a 9-year-old kid doing something like this is just amazing?
So I have artworks that I feel, I spend the majority of my time looking at the artwork that comes in through our systems. And there have been a couple of pieces that just really, really moved me. And I don't know if I should try to show some of them. But
I mean, are you allowed to?
They're online.
Okay, so if you can load the web page, then on the top left-hand corner of the screen, there's a little computer monitor with a white arrow. That is screen share. And if you click on the screen share, then you click on application window and pick the actual web page you are sharing it with. And then it should swap your webcam for the image.
Okay,
so you open up the web page first with a picture, and then you go to screen share and try and share that screen.
So where is the screen share?
On the left-hand side, it's the second icon from the top. It's a little green monitor with a white arrow. And if you move the mouse over it, it says screen share.
On the right-hand side?
On the left-hand side. So you have to move your mouse all the way over to the left-hand side.
Okay. Yes. Come on. So it's, these are just a couple of examples.
Okay, so once you clicked on screen share, then choose application window. And now that's me. And now you're going to go open up the actual page you want to share.
So these are just things that are loaded on our website. But, this is a fabulous image, actually from a film. Here's another piece from a student from China. And let's see if I can find some of my favorites from the children's contest, because that's most relevant, I believe, to the audience that is online right now.
And are you doing a Mars competition at all?
We will probably do that in the near future. Right now, we're talking about the moon in honor of what you brought up, which was the fact that we are celebrating the future return to the moon. So here are a couple of examples that I love. I don't know if you can you see my mouse?
We can see, yeah, we can see the mouse. That one is of the two. It looks like are they planting something?
So actually what they've done is discovered something. So for all of our contests, we require an artist statement. And so you give the young person an opportunity to actually tell a little bit about the backstory. And so this is a piece from a young man, I think he was 15, from India. And he was, in the story, these two astronauts were charged with finding another place where humanity could live, because it was a bit sad, but that we had not heeded the warnings of overpopulation and pollution and all of that. And so we had done so much damage to our own planet that they were charged with basically saving humanity by finding another place. So they have, this is just like what you were talking about. It is a mixture of fact and fantasy, but it still has impact and messaging. So you probably can't see it because it's too small in the moment. But there's a plant here. So they have just visited another place where clearly life can survive. And what's happening here is this intimate moment between the two astronauts where one is putting his or her hand on the shoulder of the other and said that we've done it. We have actually found a place where humans can live, and we're going to save humanity. So there's a lot of emotion and why that can be captured, and knowing that a lot of people say, oh my goodness, that was just a 15-year-old. We adults have a tendency to underestimate what power young people have in their abilities to communicate.
Wow.
And so I have lots more examples, but we only have 3 minutes.
Okay.
So,
if you click on the bottom of the screen, there's a little Hangout tab that you can
stop
click on.
sharing.
There's so stop sharing should bring your camera back.
I clicked it.
Oh, there we go.
See
Now
me?
you're back. Okay, that is amazing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the quality of those images is phenomenal. But what about the multimedia, the movies, and the music? Are we talking any hits here that are going to rival Bruno Mars? Excuse the pun.
So we have had fabulous artwork in all the different genre. I think that music and film is the hardest. And so we are always trying to reach out and really ask young people to really work hard and create music and film. We have had some spectacular pieces that could be played by live symphonies. And one piece in particular was inspired by an image from the Hubble Space Telescope of a formation called the Eagle Nebula. And this young man, who I believe was also 15 at the time, wrote an entire symphony plus choral piece inspired by that image. And it was very deep and moody, but it completely captured the majesty of this incredible imagery from the Hubble Space Telescope. But we have also had ukulele music and guitar music and band and jazz. And so there is no limit to the style. And as I mentioned, you brought up this interesting question about whether or not things that are not scientifically accurate are okay. We encourage people to be as accurate as possible. And in some contests, we'll give a few bonus points if you don't break any laws of physics. But we never rule out anything that is fantasy for the same reasons that you brought up. It's very important to leave as much of a window and opportunity for creative thinking and engagement as possible. So we try to put as few barriers as possible.
So my hopes in winning the finger painting competition are probably a little bit far-fetched, but you never know.
But you could be a fabulous judge.
Well, I could be, because with these fat fingers, all I have to do is just touch the paper and I'm making a whole series of planets all over the place. So if, in one last moment of inspiration, if you were going to give advice to any young people who are going to start out and want to be the next you, what information would you give them, or advice would you give them to follow in your footsteps?
So think about what's important to you. Follow your passions. Don't be afraid when you hit challenges. Even the most successful people have had them. They just may not talk about them, or they may not be obvious. It's not whether you're challenged, it's how you respond to your challenge. And the last bit of advice is expose yourself as broadly to experiences and knowledge as possible, but do also realize that you're going to have to pursue something at a deep level to become really good at it.
That is fantastic. Now, are there any questions, Mr. McNulty? Anyone in your group that want to squeeze in a last question? No? Okay. And Katrin, all the way from Germany? No?
Is it possible to listen to the music?
Is it possible to listen to the music? That is a very interesting question.
Yes.
What we might have to do is get creative, because I don't know if we can play the music through Google Hangouts, but maybe we can try. If do you have a link to the music?
So there are some links here.
If you just now top left-hand corner, the little blue block is the chat. So if you copy the actual link and paste it in the chat, maybe what I can do is I can play it via my phone, and then you'll hear it through the microphone.
So are you, which one are you interested in hearing? You want to hear the Pillars of Creation, right? Well, the one that I was talking about?
Yes, let's hear that one. We'll try it. Maybe it'll come through the speakers. Let's try it.
It's extremely moody. It's not, it's I don't know. I think I should share my screen as well.
No, I don't know if we can share the screen, but I don't know if the sound will work.
Can you hear anything?
Yes, we can.
Okay, let me make it louder then. Here's my thing. And I want to share, I'm going to share my screen. Now we're going overtime, but I hope you're all okay with that. Okay, so I'm going to share it because this is, this includes a video, and we probably won't be able to play it all because it is getting late, but I'll take you through just the first start of it. This is actually taking place in Cologne, Germany. The footage is from the live performance, and it was a children's symphony that was playing it. Can you hear it?
You can.
And see it?
Yeah. Wow, that was fascinating. But I mean, I noticed that if you were watching the video, you'd have to see the video to understand the context of the music, and a lot of it is, if you closed your eyes, it was almost like there was an eeriness to it, but an awe-inspiring eeriness to it. It wasn't like a flowy musical, you know, a Beethoven or a Mozart. It was more like, pay attention to me, listen to the different sounds, listen to the way I go low and high, and it was quite fascinating.
Yes, and what you're missing is, because you can't see it very well in the video, is we actually panned the structure from the Hubble Space Telescope image on that big screen in the back. And so people were listening to the music, but also looking as we panned through the image. And so it was this very interesting multi-sensory experience, and it's very inspiring, So anyway, but we do also, I mean, we could be here all day because, I could also show you footage of the exploratorish, something like the exploring engineer on ukulele and voice. So we have many different styles.
Wow. Well, I'm now inspired to write a piece for the tambourine and the triangle because I think those are the only two instruments I do know how to play, although I've been told I can play the fool as well. And maybe we can put something out there that the masses might enjoy. You never know. But I do think my planets are ready for the finger painting competition, and the tambourine, we are going to take this competition by storm. And I will also sign my age and maybe knock off a couple of years so that I might stand a better chance of winning. Sadly, they might then judge me according to their age as well, which is quite sad. But anyway, Jancy, I want to say thank you so much for giving up of your time. We will be promoting your competition. We will want as many young people as possible to take part in the art competition because, as much as we love promoting math, science, technology, engineering. My first degree was actually an arts degree, and my second degree was a STEM degree, a science degree. And, I sense that a lot of people are quite explicit when they do science, and they tend to, as you said, they tend to say, listen, what did you say you're doing? An arts degree. Well, okay, that's lovely that you're doing the arts degree, but I don't think you can help us solve a problem here because you haven't really been trained in problem solving. And the irony is that sometimes you need that different perspective to actually solve the problem. So I really do appreciate your input. Thank you so much. And Mr. McNulty, thank you for your group joining us live, and Katrine in Germany. And we had from Russia, we had from Brazil who popped in. We also had from Greece, and also the people who are watching the live broadcast as well. Thank you for joining us. And we will put more information up on YouTube, all the relevant links for the competition that you can take part. Out of interest, are there any people in your class, Ms. McNulty, who are going to take part in our competition?
Well, we have all the information now, and we've got several other art classes around the district who are going to find out about it shortly.
Absolute win. And Germany, are we going to have the two of you taking part?
Yes, I think we are really interested in drawing and creating some new pictures of the atmosphere.
Wonderful, but don't go to the finger painting category. That's my one. I will be taking that one. I don't like any competition. Okay, and thank you very much. We're going to, before we stop the broadcast, one big smile from Jancy so we can get a screenshot of you looking at your camera directly. Where is my screenshot button? That's perfect. And another one just in case, because YouTube, whenever you play the video, they sometimes tend to pick their own random photo, which, to be honest, is the one where you are half closing one eye. So we've got a lovely smile. There we go. I think we've got the right one. I'm going to stop the broadcast over here.